playing Ivy's song. It became a song about his sister that day in 1974, with the raw, cold air starting up over the wetlands. Peter was a boy of 10, sitting on the patio in shorts and t-shirt. Up high, over the mountains, fast-moving streets of gray scored the fading blue skies. The hackberry trees shifted forcefully in the wind, confirming the end of summer. Peter's teeth chattered, yet he refused to go inside the house. He turned up the radio in defiance. The syrupy chords and sweet lyrics were a balm, even as the tunes slipped in and out of the shifting breeze. Yesterday they brought Ivy home from the hospital. No, it was Annie's song. That was the title. He still got it wrong even after all these years. As a teenager, Peter recalled his therapist pointing it out before he realized it himself. He couldn't remember the doctor's name. The paramedics had set up a hospital bed in the house with the hackberry trees, and oxygen hissed out of a tube under Ivy's nose. "Peter," he heard his father say, "turn that radio off. Your sister isn't well. Your mother's trying to sleep." Mother was always trying to sleep. "Can't I hear the rest of it?" he said, meaning the song. "Turn it off," his father said. Peter twisted in the patio chair. His father stood in the shadows of the sliding glass door. All the lights were off in the house. His father, tall and reedy, wore faded jeans and a plaid shirt. His crew cut needed trimming. He had the look of a man who worked with his hands, but he worked in an office and was away much of the time. Peter was uneasy around him. "I'm not going to ask you again, Peter." Peter reached over, turned the radio dial all the way down. There was silence for a moment. The lapse of man-made noise switching to the wind in the trees. "Come inside," his father said, softer now. "It's freezing out here." "In a minute," he mumbled. His father cleared his throat. "Your sister's awake." "Peter?" "Okay," Peter said. "Come say goodnight." "I don't want to," Peter said. He hated what had happened. They'd been close, even though Ivy wasn't even 5. But now she scared him. Thin and white, bald and blue-veined. In her white nightgown, her eyes were like Jonesy's before his father took the dog out, along with his revolver. "Peter," his father said now. "Your sister?" He looked Peter in the eye. "He always said you looked someone in the eye. You're old enough to know she's not going to be with us much longer. You do know that, don't you?" Peter blinked, then nodded, but he couldn't look his father in the eye anymore. "Come say goodnight," his father said. "I don't want to," Peter croaked. His father sighed and shook his head. He pulled the sliding door shut, and Peter was left with the trees snapping at the sky. Many hours later, Peter woke in the bed in the room off the split level. It was dark, save for the moonlight coming through the window. The cowboys on the wallpaper were riding across the prairie. His father must have scooped him up out of the chair on the porch and put him to bed. His father could be so quiet. Peter thought he heard a noise. Perhaps it was the wind, or a critter on the roof, or from the room Ivy was in. He would say goodnight to Ivy now, without his father there. Peter climbed out of bed, still in his blue shorts and the Costa Rica t-shirt his father had brought back from one of his trips. The whisper of Ivy's oxygen drifted down the hall. Peter tiptoed to her room quietly so as not to wake his parents. The shag of the carpet brushed the bottoms of his feet. Then he thought he heard something else coming from Ivy's room, a creak of a floorboard. He heard another sound, or lack of it, like when he had turned the radio off earlier that day. A lack of sound. The fizzing of the tube had stopped. Peter looked around the partially open door. In the minimal light from the window, he saw his father bent over Ivy. Red plaid shirt tails wrinkled out over his jeans. His father stroked Ivy's bald head and stood up. There was no tube under Ivy's nose. The tube lay on the floor beside the hospital bed. Ivy was still, not sleeping, more than not sleeping. A small noise escaped his father's throat. Peter saw the oxygen bottle clearly. He had worried so much about it running out. He knew exactly where it was and what the dial meant. And in the semi-darkness, he saw the needle, like the radio dial he had turned down, all the way to the left. "What are you doing?" Peter wanted to say, but couldn't. Perhaps if he didn't say it, it wouldn't be happening. But the truth was, he was scared. And now, almost 40 years later, sitting in Golden Gate Park, where he'd lived for a while now, he thought he heard a distant radio playing Ivy's song. The trees were moving just like those hackberries did that day. And the primitive landscape, he saw it as he did then, and it made him think of Ivy and that soft dusk dying.